All right, bonjour à tous. Hello, welcome to my video about my progress after 120 days in French. That's all the French I will say because, as I've been saying, I haven't been focusing on speaking. I've been mostly focusing on understanding and comprehension. That's been my number one priority. Learning enough vocabulary, watching enough TV, listening to enough podcasts, reading enough material so that I can have a high level of comprehension and then eventually begin practicing speaking, bridging that gap. So hopefully this will be a quick video. I keep on saying that every month, but this time I think it will be because I don't think there is that much to say. I feel like once you get to, I would say I'm probably early intermediate, at least in terms of comprehension. When you're at early intermediate and above, there's really not much to say in terms of what you should be doing or your progress. I mean, after every month, you'll probably read a few books, you'll probably watch some TV, you'll probably listen to a bunch of audiobooks or podcasts, you'll have learned a bunch of words, maybe figured out this grammar concept that you've been struggling over. But it's not like it changes. Every month, you just kind of do more of the same. But I like to do some quick updates and updates also on my thoughts on the process so far because I feel like these videos are not only showing my Anki statistics, that's kind of the anchor of each video, but really it's about recording my thoughts on the process. What's been working, what's not been working, how have I changed along the way, and so on. So that's the main reason I like to do these videos so that in the future I can look back and think, well, what worked, what didn't, and what was my perspective along the way, which I think is nice for posterity. So let's get to it. Let's talk about my statistics, which is why everyone is here, of course. So currently I have 4,122 cards, which is represented with 2,383 notes. And again, I'm using that number as a proxy for unique words that I know. Again, that's only an approximate because there's lots of words that are not in my Anki cards, but I have in my passive vocabulary. And then there's plenty of cards that are just like articles and stuff like little grammar words and stuff like that that repeat. And so it's not perfect, but that's my rough estimate of how many words I know, individual words. And again, some of those are conjugations, some of those are unique words, so it's not perfect. But if you really wanted to fudge it down, I doubt I have more than 300 flashcards that are not individual new words, or 300 notes rather. So, uh, but I don't really care that much. Like I said, it's just a rough approximate. I use it as a proxy, but that's all that matters. So, like I said, 2,383 notes. Let's look at my statistics. So, what's really surprising is that over time, over 4 months, my percentage correct for my young and learning, the percentage correct is pretty stable. It hasn't really changed month to month. In fact, my learning has actually increased back to my historic average of around 92%. And my learning percentage and my mature percentage they've really not changed. The young is slightly higher, around 97.5%, and my mature cards are hovering correct around 96 point something percent. And that's been very, very steady and consistent for 4 months, 120 days, which is great. I mean, if anything, it's inefficient because it should be closer to 90%, but I could probably get away with taking longer between reviews and adjusting the ease so that I don't see the cards quite as often so that my percentage actually goes down. But so far I'm just leaving it because why change it if it's working? So what's also surprising is that I'm getting cards that are really quite old, right? It's so fun to see words like le bâtiment, for example, building, which was one of the very, very first words I did in September of this year. And it's funny to see that. I still remember it, which is great. And it's great to like remember the actual sentences because I have so many of these sentences floating around in my head right now that I've actually completely memorized. I can just once I see the word, I can recall the exact sentence that it was a part of. Which again, eventually some of those sentences start to blur together, and I occasionally have to sort of invent a sentence that will work with the word when it's just by itself. Uh, when I recall it. So if I see a word just isolated, I always want to my answer to that flashcard is, can I fit it into a sentence correctly? And usually that just means remembering the sentence that it came from, because the vast majority of my cards, I just recall the exact sentence. But for the really old cards, occasionally I will just sort of make up a sentence because I don't always remember exactly what sentence it came from. I had a word nouveau the other day, but it was the masculine form, and I didn't actually remember that it was part of a sentence that said mon nouveau foulard est en soie. So my new scarf is silk, or is of silk, or in silk. It's a silk scarf, basically. And I completely forgot that sentence. Well, I didn't forget the sentence. It was in my brain somewhere, but I forgot that nouveau was part of that sentence. But I kind of just came up with a sentence that was still masculine that fit. So that was fun, and I got it right. So I know that word, of course, but occasionally, yeah, these really old sentences that I've had, they kind of mish together. But it is really surprising how many of these sentences I can just recall like it's nothing. And again, it's not like I'm learning the sentences so that I can speak them later. I learn the sentences so that I have internalized the grammar structures and the vocabulary that words are associated with. That's all that matters. So if in 2 years I don't remember these specific sentences, it doesn't really matter as long as I remember the words and I remember the grammar structures they represent. And if I have to come up with a sentence that I know is correct that uses the word, that's fine. I don't have to remember the exact sentence. But so far, remembering the exact sentence has worked actually really surprisingly well. So I'm not going to knock it. So yeah, so those are my overall statistics. And again, my year percentage statistics in terms of the correct is pretty much exactly the same as the month stuff. So again, very, very consistent, which is interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but interesting. Let's go up a few things. Interval is not super interesting. The intervals for the year breakdown, I just think is kind of an interesting gap where there's a huge dip down at about 6 weeks, which is like, and then it goes back up again, and then so it kind of looks like a bell curve, but without the top of the bell curve. I don't know what that means, if anything. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. I just noticed that the distribution of intervals is a little strange, but my longest interval right now is 8.2 months, so I'm not going to see that for until like August of this year, which is crazy, or of next year, I guess. So that was probably going to be something like le bateau or le bâtiment or something like that. Some really old words that I learned right at the very beginning. I've been staying consistent with how many cards. This is probably a good time to. So yeah, every week I do 210 cards like normal. The last couple weeks during Christmas time, I've been adding them over a couple days. But every week I always do 210 cards, 30 cards every single day, which has led to a sort of unfortunate development and a kind of a worrying trend. If you look here, that the amount of time I'm studying per week has been steadily rising over the last 5 or 6 weeks, actually exactly 6 weeks, which coincidentally was when I started studying from the frequency dictionary, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, not my reviews. So on average, it takes me more like 13 seconds per card as opposed to my historic 11 seconds per card, um, or a little bit less. And that's actually been translating into, instead of somewhere between 35 to 45 minutes, it's been translating into closer to an hour every day, which is not great, of course. And also, I noticed that my total cards per day has actually also improved or increased quite a lot as well, but not nearly to the same extent as the actual time. Like if you notice that it has slowly been creeping up the number of reviews per day. This is representing per week, but the time it's taking has grown faster than the amount of extra cards, I think. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but it does seem to be. So there's a probably better view. So it is creeping up at a slightly faster rate than before, but my review time is going much faster up. So I don't know. My theory is that the cards in general are harder to remember because, like I said before, they're less concrete words. But I don't know. It is what it is. Uh, it's been going fine though. Though the important thing is my retention rate is exactly the same. It just takes me a little bit longer to remember them, but I'm still remembering them at the exact same rate. So nothing is going wrong. In fact, everything is going perfect. It's just I wish I didn't have to study an hour a day instead of 30 minutes a day, but it is what it is. Um, Almost 80 hours of study time, which is cool. Uh, yeah, that's cool. And yeah, and this is my today. So this today took me almost 14 seconds per card, which is honestly way too long. But often that'll be me having to recall an entire sentence, and I always read back the entire sentence every single time, and that's probably slowing me down. I could probably speed up my reviews if I just said the individual word for all my closed deletions, and then said the entire sentence only when I'm giving the individual word. But I think it helps me remember the entire sentence if I say the whole thing every time. And it works on my pronunciation, which of course is still pretty bad because I'm not focusing on speaking, but it does help with that. So I think it's probably worth taking the extra time to do that. It's just I wish I wish that it hasn't been taking so long to actually do the reviews. Um, Also, it's interesting that occasionally there's these troughs on a very consistent, seems like a consistent basis. I don't know where they're coming from, but um, there's that. I don't know if it has something to do with reviews in the past or something, but these weird troughs of time are interesting. I don't know what they mean. But yeah, that's my Anki reviews. So, like I said, kind of every month, so far so good. Very, very stable in terms of my retention, which is great, 96.73%. And my year average, 96.83%, which is, again, very good. Um, I'll show you my frequency list. So currently, in terms of the French frequency list, I'm on number 582, which means all that means is that there's definitely words I know past 582, but I'm at 582 in terms of systematically going through it. Now, the amount of words I have on my kind of curated list up to 1,000, so that I'll have covered at least the top 1,000 words. I'm on to basically number 332 or 335, roughly. But you notice that throughout the whole list, there's actually many of these words crossed out. I guess just to motivate me, maybe, or something like that. But so a lot of these words in past where I'm officially in the list have already been crossed out because of certain sentences that, as I've been making sentences, they've had them, so I don't have to repeat them. And so uh, in my actual curated list, like I said, I'm at number 332, but there's a bunch of the words I already know, so there's probably only about 200 more words, which means that probably by the end of next month, or in 30 more days, I'll have actually finished the top 1,000. And then I'll be at a crossroads because I have to decide. Once I get to 1,000 words, do I continue with the frequency dictionary, or do I only get my vocabulary from the books that I'm reading? And that's a good question. I don't know what the answer is. I have to decide how I feel. Do I feel like I'm still getting a lot of benefit from these words? I think I am. I definitely notice a lot of improvements in my vocabulary, and very, very often I'll learn a word from this list in my Anki review, and then then in a few hours later in the day, I'll watch the news in French or watch a TV show, and I'll see that exact word for the very first time. I'll notice it, and it's great. And so that's been working. So there's no real reason to change it. But one possible strategy my original plan was just to go to 1,000, but we'll see. I'm gonna definitely go to 1,000. That's my goal, and then I'll make a decision. Am I going to keep on going to 2,000? Am I going to only use books that I'm reading to get my vocabulary? I don't know. Maybe I'll do 50-50. Maybe half my cards will come from this list. Half my cards will come from whatever book I'm reading. So that'll help me cover some more literary stuff that might not show up in this particular list. I don't know. But I'm going to just stick with the list until I hit to 1,000 and then make a decision where I'm going to go. Do I just stay with the list completely? And if I'm getting benefit from it, but I definitely am, and I would recommend it to anyone. It's not the easiest list of sentences to learn, but I think it's very valuable. Now, just to wrap up, in terms of other things I'm doing other than Anki, I've been continuing to read. I finally finished Harry Potter, the first one. I finished the last like 50 pages or so in like a day or two. So my reading speed has definitely picked up, and because it's Christmas break, I've had some time to do that, and it was great. Like compared to the beginning, it was so easy compared to like the end. Like of course I didn't know every word, but I could read it fairly quickly and more or less understand everything that's being said. Again, certain sentences better than others. There are some sentences I know every single word and understand it completely. Some sentences, it's not so much, but I know it just kind of. So by the end, yeah, I could really just kind of breeze through it. And of course, it does really help that I already know the story. Like, it helps a lot, I think, more than I probably realize. But compared to the beginning when it was impossible to read it, like it just like I couldn't understand anything, it's been great. Like, so I started a new book. I I read a couple comics, graphic novels, but or I guess they weren't graphic novels, Asterix and this other one, but I started a translation of Agatha Christie, it's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So that's going okay. I feel like a mystery might be fun to read. That's kind of the fun of Harry Potter. So I feel like reading a murder mystery might be a fun story. The only issue is that it is a translation, which again, translations are not great sometimes because they don't have it's not originally in French, so it's missing something there. But it's fun to read. It's not too hard. Like, it's definitely maybe slightly harder than Harry Potter, but it's hard to say because it's books are always hard at the very beginning as you get used to the vocabulary. But I read the first three chapters and it's been fine. Again, I just kind of skip over. I don't look up words. I just skip over the words that I don't know, and I am understanding it for the most part. It's about this family, and there's people. People think they might have committed suicide, but it might be a murder. Blah blah blah. Classic family drama. So it's been good, and I'll read that, and then after that, I might. I also got a book, an actual French book by I don't remember his name, but Balzac, I believe his name is. That I'll be reading, I think, after. So it's a real French novel, so I think that'll be nice that it's actually written in real French instead of a translation of English. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, so reading has been great. Just trying to do more of that. I've been starting to watch the news, and I've been listening to a political podcast. It's more about foreign affairs, but in French. And every time I listen to an episode, it becomes easier and easier to understand. The first episode that was about Vladimir Putin, I didn't understand hardly anything they said. Like, I kept on hearing Putin or however they say it, but I could hardly understand a single thing they were saying. And then the next episode I listened to, I think it was about Brexit. Yeah, it was about Brexit, the British exit from the European Union, and I could understand like a bit of it. Like, I could understand kind of some things they were saying, not a lot. And then just tonight I was listening to one about the Amazon rainforest, and the first guest, I could understand like 95% of what she was saying. It was great. Like, but talking about how big it was. Like, it was simple language, I guess, but still, it's a podcast and just pure dialogue. So it's obviously not easy, but so that's an improvement. I think my ears definitely improved, but I do notice that it's kind of funny when you don't know anything. Anytime you have a little bit of understanding, it's like this huge victory. But once you've kind of crossed the threshold into understanding a lot of it, every time you don't understand something, it feels like a failure. And so even though it's like kind of an illusion, like even though you're understanding more and more, you're almost becoming more aware of what you don't understand, which almost feels more discouraging. So, which it shouldn't be because it actually means that you're actually understanding way more. But you just have to know that it will get better over time, and that does indicate that so you are understanding so much more, and that's true both with the novel and with listening or watching TV. Because when I first watched an episode of Call My Agent on Netflix, the French show about movie star agents, basically, uh, I'm I couldn't understand a single word they were saying in that first episode, like almost nothing. Uh, I think it has to do with how they talk. They're always like whispering in that show. It's very strange in the hallway. They're always like mumbling in their mouths, and I guess I don't know. That's how people talk in Paris. I guess it's so much less clear than a dub, because dubbed content I think is so much clearer. I think for I don't know why that would be, but it is. Maybe because the voice actors don't have to worry about their physical performance, just on their vocal performance. So yeah, like the first episode, but by the fourth episode, you know what? I could actually start to understand it a little bit more and could follow the plot. But yeah, that first episode, practically nothing I could understand. But it is amazing though, just by giving it some time, it's like your brain just kind of clicks in and you can understand so much more the next time you listen to it. And sometimes the more frustrated you are the first time, the more of improvement your ear actually is getting because your brain's working so hard, like, oh, why can't I understand it? Then it works like double time to try and understand it better for next time. And that's what I've noticed that I'll listen to a podcast, for example, and won't understand a single thing. And then like the next time I listen to the same podcast, it's like magically I understand way more. And it's the same thing with books. Like um, just just read a lot and it's like super frustrating, but then the next time I pick it up, it's so much easier. It is really kind of amazing the subconscious learning process versus the conscious learning process, and I think they're both important. But uh, and if I looked back and if I actually like tested myself in terms of my listening and reading ability, of course, it'd be way, way, way higher. But like I said, it's frustrating because I'm now aware of all the things I don't know. Same thing with my pronunciation. I'm starting to focus on it a little bit more and realizing like where it's like my R's are still kind of a mess right now, but and certain vowels, of course, are not very good. But you start to, as you like become more aware, you kind of are more aware of your mistakes instead of just being happy you're kind of doing things right. So I think it's just important not to, you know, put yourself down and realize that it's the frustration is actually a sign of improvement, not a sign of decline. So with that, I think I'll leave this. So that's been my 120-day update, my fourth month update. I will see you again in 30 days. Have a good night. Bye.